The Enchanted Princess. Once upon a time there was a poor craftsman who had two sons, a good one called Hans and a bad one called Helmerich. However, as seems to be the way of the world, the father was fonder of the bad one than the good one. Now it came to pass that one year was an unusually expensive one and the master's purse became empty. Well, he thought, one must do what it takes to stay alive. As your customers have come to you so many times, now it is your turn to show them courtesy by bestirring yourself to go to them. No sooner said than done. Early in the morning he set out and knocked on many a grand door, but as it just so happens that the grandest gentlemen are not the best pairs, no one felt inclined to settle his bill. So the craftsman returned faint and weary to his hometown that evening, and he gloomily sat down before the door of the tavern, all alone, for he neither had the heart to chat with his fellow tipplers, nor looked forward to seeing his wife's long face. But as he sat there lost in thought, he could not help listening to the conversation being held inside. A stranger who had just arrived from the capital was telling the company how the beautiful princess had been placed in confinement by a wicked sorcerer and would have to stay in her prison for the rest of her life unless someone could be found who would complete the 3 tasks the sorcerer had set. If such a one were to be found, then the princess would be his, as would all of her magnificent castle with every one of its treasures. The master heard this with half an ear at first, then with a whole one, and at last with both of them, for he thought, my son Helmerich has a quick brain, he could trim a billygoat's beard were he told to. What are the odds he completes the tasks and becomes the husband of the beautiful princess and lord over land and people? For so had the king, her father, let it be proclaimed. He returned home straight away, all his debts and customers driven from his mind by the latest news, which he hastily imparted to his wife. On the very next morning he told Helmerich that he would equip him with horse and arms for the journey, and how soon Helmerich set out. When he took his leave, he promised his parents that he would, in next to no time, have them and his stupid brother Hans fetched in a coach and 6, for he imagined himself to be king already. As he rode arrogantly away, so did he vent his spite on everything that crossed his path. The birds, who sat on the branches and praised God the Father with song in their own wise, he scared away from the boughs with his riding crop, and no creature crossed his path without his unleashing some malicious prank on it. And first of all he came upon an ant hill, he had his horse trample it down, and when the enraged ants crept up onto his horse and so on to Helmerich himself, biting horse and man, he smote or crushed every one of them to death. Afterwards, he came upon a clear pond in which 12 ducks were swimming. Helmerich lured them to the bank and killed 11 of them, only the 12th one escaping. Finally, he came across a lovely beehive, and he did to the bees as he had done to the ants. And so it was his pleasure to torment and destroy innocent creatures, not to his own advantage, but from sheer malice. Now when Helmerich reached, with the setting sun, the splendid castle in which the princess was spellbound, he knocked violently on the locked gate. All was silent, the rider pounded ever more thunderously. Finally a sash window opened and an old woman with a face the color of cobwebs looked out. She crossly asked what he wanted. "I want to free the princess," cried Helmerich, "be quick and open up for me." "More haste, less speed, my son," said the old woman. "There's always tomorrow, I'll expect you here at 9 o'clock. And she slid the window shut. At 9 o'clock the next morning, when Helmerich came back, the old woman was there ready for him with a little cask full of linseed, which she scattered over a beautiful meadow. "Pick up the seeds," she said to the rider. "When I return in an hour, the task must have been completed." But Helmerich thought it was a silly practical joke and not worth bending his back for. He went for a stroll the while, and when the old woman returned the cask was as empty as before. "That is not good," she said. Then she took 12 golden keys from her pocket and threw them one by one into the deep, dark castle pond. "Fetch the keys up," she said. "When I return in an hour, the task must have been completed." Helmerich laughed and did as before. When the old woman returned and this task was not completed either, she exclaimed twice, "Not good! Not good!" Yet she took him by the hand and led him up the steps into the great hall of the castle. 3 females were sitting there, each one covered with a thick veil. "Choose, my son," said the old woman, "but take care to choose correctly. I shall come back in an hour." Helmeric was no wiser when she came back than when she had gone away, but in his arrogance, he cried out at random, "I choose the one on the right." Then all three threw back their veils. In the middle sat the fair princess, on the right and on the left 2 hideous dragons, and the one on the right seized Helmeric in its claws and cast him out of the window into a deep abyss. A year had gone by since Helmeric had set out to rescue the princess, and still no coach and 6 had arrived at his parents' house. "Ah," said the father, "if only our clumsy Hans had set out instead of our best boy, our loss would be the lesser." "Father," said Hans, "let me go, I want to have a try too." But the father was unwilling, for if the clever son had failed, what chance of success was there for the clumsy son? As his father refused him horse and arms, Hans started out in secret and went on foot for 3 days, more or less, down the same road that his brother had ridden in one. But he was not afraid, and at night he slept on the soft moss under green branches as peacefully as under his parents' roof. The birds of the forest did not fear him, but sang him to sleep with their finest melodies. Now when he came to the ants, who were busy completing their new ant hill, he did not disturb them but rather wanted to be of help, and the little animals which crept up him, he picked off without killing, even when they bit him. He too lured the ducks to the bank, but to feed them crumbs, for the bees, he threw down the flowers he had picked on the way. So he happily arrived at the king's castle and tapped bashfully at the window. The door opened immediately and the old woman asked for his wish. "If I am not too lowly, I too would like to try to free the beautiful princess," he said. "Try it, my son," said the old woman, "but if you do not pass the 3 tests, it will cost you your life." "Very well, mother," said Hans, "tell me what I'm to do." The old woman now gave him the task with the linseed. Hans was no sluggard at stooping, but it had already struck 3/4 past the hour, and the cask was still not half full. He was just about to abandon hope when black ants suddenly appeared, in more than sufficient number, and in a few minutes there was not a single seed left on the meadow. When the old woman came, she said, "That is good," and threw the 12 keys into the pond, which he was to fetch up within the hour. But Hans brought no keys up from the depths. However deep he dived, he could not reach the bottom. In despair he sat down on the bank. Then the 12 ducks came swimming up, each one with a golden key in its beak, which they threw into the moist grass. So this task was also accomplished when the old woman returned to lead him into the hall, where the 3rd and hardest task awaited him. Hans lost heart as he looked at the 3 identical veiled figures. Who could help him here? Then a swarm of bees came flying in through the open window. They circled through the hall and droned around the mouths of the 3 veiled forms. But they quickly flew back from the ones on the right and on the left, for the dragon smelt of the pitch and brimstone that they lived on. The bees all circled around the figure in the middle and softly hummed and buzzed, "The middle one, the middle one." For the aroma of their own honey, which the princess loved to eat, had wafted towards them. Therefore, when the old woman returned after an hour, Hans said quite confidently, "I choose the middle one." And then the evil dragons flew out the window while the beautiful princess threw off her veil, delighted to be set free and to have such a handsome bridegroom. And Hans sent the most express messenger to the princess's father, and a golden carriage drawn by 6 horses to his parents, and they all lived in the lap of luxury, and if they have not died, they will be still alive today.